Hi, everybody. Welcome back to KORTX's Empowering Transformative Growth series. In each episode, we pull back the curtain and give you an exclusive look at the talented individuals behind KORTX, delving deep into their stories, experiences, and the unique contributions that they bring to our team. It's our way of showcasing the brilliant minds that drive our commitment to delivering innovative solutions and ultimately empowering transformative growth for our clients and partners. So without further ado, let's jump into today's conversation. One that I have been waiting for the longest. KORTX's co-founder, my good friend, as well as our COO, Eric Lee. What's up?
How are you, Chris? Quite the intro.
It's well deserved. I'm going to jump right into this. We're going to go back to college. We went to Grand Valley together. We had some great times outside of the classroom. We both thought that spinning up our own water sports apparel company called GNARSTAR was a great opportunity for us to go out and have some fun. I think we learned some lessons along the way. What type of memories do you have from that experience?
I mean, definitely some memories. One, I think we both learned the importance of bookkeeping. I'm not sure if we did any of that. But no, I mean, it was exciting. I think both you and I looked at it as just like a challenge to get something out into the world. I know that sounds pretty heady, but it was, I don't know, just a unique opportunity where we both had a passion for something. I don't think either of us were very good at the sport. And so how can we attach ourselves to that, but then also, have fun creating something? And so in that, we took a little bit of business, a little bit of kind of graphics or maybe creative design, merged those together and tried selling it to people. Oddly enough, people enjoyed it. We liked doing events, and it was a lot of fun along the way.
Do you still own the domain?
I think I do. I think it just auto renews.
We gotta spin that back up.
My biggest fear is that it is still actually out there and like the cart doesn't work anymore. Those were some other kind of business learnings in terms of, I don't think the infrastructure for e-commerce was quite what we see today. You have the Shopifys of the world where, everybody can get into trying to run their own business. Back then, I think you and I, coerced my brother into spinning up an e-commerce, and people exploited that to the end of the day. And so we wouldn't have inventory, but we had no way of keeping them from buying it. So again, in that bookkeeping and maybe policy area, maybe not our finest hour.
All right, so we had GNARSTAR. I think we had family and friends that were always looking for the discounts too. We did some decent sales from time to time. I always gave you a hard time because you were such a perfectionist. And I'm a sales guy. I want product in my hand. I want to go out and do things. Your biggest thing that you probably still do today is you show me teasers at certain points in time to get me excited and talking about it. But I think you learned at an early stage not to give me the potential product or the new design in this case, because I was going to go sell it. So as you think about like GNARSTAR and you think about like the way that we went through product design and when we thought things were appropriate to get out in front of the marketplace, like how did that philosophy turn into a lot of what you do today at KORTX when we're thinking about releasing products and features and all those great things that you have to analyze on a daily basis?
Well, I think one takeaway I have there is, perfect can be the enemy of good. I'm not sure if that's the exact quote there, but I think a lot of creatives probably fall into this trap of, through whether it's design, product, anything else, you're putting a little bit of yourself out there. That's a little bit scary. That's why I usually avoid all these interviews. You're like, all right, am I fully prepared? Is it going to go great? And, it doesn't have to be perfect. And most of the time that product is something great for them. But that reason that you kind of do the teasers is, one, you're kind of checking in with your audience, or in this case, the person who's going to go sell this or has been talking to the customers. And so you want to make sure you're on the right path, that you're kind of sourcing feedback. And you can course correct before you're too far down the line there. But again, I would say, much like those t-shirts or much like business, this is all an iterative thing. And so get the product out there and then refine from there and allow it to grow.
I'm going to stick on the college occupation path here for a minute. So in between class, in between going out to the lake and wakeboarding, I think we had a lot of fun in between of like trying to figure out what we wanted to do with life. I don't know if you got a lecture from your dad or you had an instinct that you had to get a real job in college. You ended up as the business manager at the school newspaper, the Grand Valley Lanthorn, and you brought me on as a salesperson. Going back to that job in particular, again, I just ask you to reflect on it and any good memories or things that you learned that you were able to carry forward into your professional career.
Yeah, so I mean, it certainly started with how do we make some money here? I think living as a poor college student, anything that lets you, I don't know, maybe buy slightly nicer groceries that are outside of just a case of beer is usually a good thing. But outside of that, it was also how do you start to build that resume? I mean, life starts coming at you pretty quickly, and you're like, all right, I have to start getting some experiences here, understand what I'm really into. I had been focused in both marketing and finance. It seemed like a kind of a decent way to dip your toe in. So within that, there were a ton of moving pieces. So the school paper itself was fully student run. There were a handful of advisors, but you largely were kind of given these guardrails or guidelines, and then you had to collaborate with the rest of folks that were on staff and make sure that you had a paper content sales. All of that went out every week. You were working with different distribution with printers, and I kind of laugh now because that was kind of just the initial kind of toe dip into the advertising world. It's come a long way, but starting in traditional there, and then I mean, obviously you got to see the knocking door to door, the grind that happens of here's this edition we're putting out. How can we kind of contextually make this relevant? But at the same time, how do we also hit our sales goal here, make sure it all gets into the paper? And it was kind of Wild West, but it was something that was really, really enjoyable because you had a lot of people depending on you. You also had brands that wanted to make sure their message was out in front of the folks that your paper was in front of. And so there were a lot of really good learning lessons there. But then we kind of flash forward a little bit, and there was even disruption in that. And so we were starting to follow trends in terms of how many papers we would have left over. And we realized a lot of the consumption was starting to happen online. And so how do we kind of transition, but keep our core, the paper itself, the physical product, but how do we also bring that to like kind of meeting our customer where they are? And so the transitioning that into the web and then doing the same on the advertising side. And that was a difficult sale at first to say, hey, we know you've got this great front page or big article in your kitty corner to it. What if we also put you in this little rectangle online? And I don't know if a lot of people were really fully bought in on that, but that was kind of, again, one of those transitions in medium, and then being able to explain, well, here's where your audience is, here's how you're in front of them, and just making sure we had a quality product for both sides of the house.
I gotta give a shout out to Campus West. I think that allowed me to hit my quota for the first quarter or first half year that I was on board and I was under your guidance. I think one of the funniest things too about that whole experience, as we look back on it and sitting in the world of programmatic advertising, to your point, how early it was in incubation of digital advertising that we were begging people to allow us to put a banner ad online along with their print ad. And just really kind of the appreciation for like the elements of print that are still very much alive and well, how those have transitioned into the digital format and just the way that we operate today. You think about the term insertion order, where that really comes from. A lot of the great kind of what was old is new again. You know, we're really looking at integrated marketing approaches now at KORTX, which forces us to go well above and beyond our original comfort zone of just digital programmatic, heads down focus on banner ads and impression delivery. It is going back to a lot of those original roots of like, we're talking to business owners on campus. They don't have the time or the energy or really the bandwidth to just dump cash into ads that don't work and dump cash into a marketing strategy that doesn't work. We needed business results that were tied to that. So I think that's something that I know I had fun watching that. And I think the best part was that we both had to start as delivery people as well. So you're pretty much eating your own dog food.
Was the best part. Well, and if you think about it from your standpoint, you kind of have a better understanding of that audience anyway. So the second half of delivering it was you also had to kind of cycle back through and count how many weren't picked up. And you have a better understanding of like, all right, well, the business school seems to really be taking these versus, you know what I mean? And so it was, again, when you were getting back in front of Campus West as your example, you're like, all right, well, here's what downtown distribution is looking at compared to what Allendale is. Here's what your mix is. And it's just funny to watch that evolution in terms of marketing as a whole, with the underlying like basics of that haven't shifted a whole lot. It's all about really knowing this audience, knowing who this reach is, and just kind of the tools and engagement has shifted a bit.
All right, so you go early days. We're in college. We're GNARSTAR. It's entrepreneurial life. We're having fun because it's a small thing that we do on the side. We have more of a real world experience at the Lanthorn. We're accountable to certain numbers. Performance metrics are being tied in. We're responsible for our customers' money and the outcomes that it drives. You then take your first career after graduation. Your first job is PNC. You're in the business banking environment, and then you transition over to an account manager at Add This. Let's just talk about your first couple of years as a professional at those two companies. Any memorable learnings, experiences, things that you recall that you feel allowed us to parlay into what we're now doing at KORTX?
Yeah, for sure. And so I think in both, I can start with PNC and kind of add this into that as well. But was really lucky to get into a program that exposed me to a lot across banking. And so again, kind of big shift in terms of my professional career at that point. And so did formal credit training, but I think more importantly, got exposed to a lot of different managerial workshops and training around kind of building teams, but most importantly, and what was core to PNC was just kind of customer obsession. And so that was another takeaway that we had at this was as much as you were going to have to grind, be out on the road, getting in front of folks, at the end of the day, what you were doing was trying to solve their needs and make sure they have kind of the best customer service, the best experience as you're trying to achieve their goals. And so that to me was a really big focus at both of those. And it was great to see, and was certainly something that as we, kind of founded and started to develop KORTX was something that we wanted to hold true here as well.
Customer obsession, I think a great learning we both had, as well as in both those institutions. You were at PNC. I started out in recruiting. I ended up at Paychex. You're in these very large competitive environments. And there's also a level of understanding that I think I had this. I don't know if you did, but I had to develop my skill set. So I became my own competitive advantage in a lot of different ways. And I think as an entrepreneur, those are things that maybe we don't always think about. Like the reason why this business is going to be successful, I have a great idea, I have a great product, but it's really the people around me and then the passion that I put into it in a way to like streamline that to the marketplace. I think we reflected on that a lot early on. It was just like, if we didn't have those experiences, I don't know if you would have like that innate discipline to say like, I have to wake up every day and be accountable to my performance, those around me, my customers, etc. So I think that's a great point. Like customer discipline or customer focus or appreciation for customers, there's so much behind that really helps that end deliverable.
And just a quick note on that, thinking back at the early training days at the bank, you're kind of paired up with different mentors. And I remember as we're talking about kind of that grind and then the customer obsession, it was great getting to watch someone that kind of helped you navigate what is now corporate, because you hadn't been exposed to this whole new world of working, right? It's fast paced. Here are the goals. Here's how you're interacting with different departments and kind of shifting markets in general. But then most importantly, kind of seeing, while he was certainly a kind of company man, also fought the company to make sure that the customer was getting what they needed. And I remember one quote of saying, well, our titles here are relationship managers. And so if I'm not being a little bullheaded or stubborn to make sure that we get a deal across or get them kind of the best rates, we should really not be calling ourselves relationship managers, because they took that really seriously. And anytime you kind of came into a meeting, you just saw customers, like a smile came across their face, because it was like, all right, this guy cares not only about me, but about my business, and is going to do what's right for me as kind of a liaison between our business and kind of banking needs, which happened to be the case for that.
And no surprise that do the right thing is now one of our values at KORTX. So I think that is very 100%. Telling as to the importance of that. All right. October 2015. It is Friday mid-morning. I think it's October 2nd. Maybe it's the 1st. You're getting on a plane, or you think you're getting on a plane to go out to LA to meet with some customers at this, and you get pulled from that flight by your manager. You come home, you and I are having a conversation. We're also roommates at the time, so add another level of personal connectivity here. But that happens. We both get meeting invites for Monday morning, and we quickly find out our jobs have been eliminated. This is being acquired by Oracle, and there's a reduction in Salesforce as well as the client services team. Let's start with that. What was your initial reaction? Do you remember?
I think dumbfounded, really, because the sales obviously happening during a time where the company's doing really well, and so you're pumped up about it. Again, kind of like you said, was on the way to meet with some of our customers that we were really excited to kind of get through that pitch and get into the planning to renew for the next year. And then to walk in and find out the whole side of the org is eliminated. You're certainly kind of caught off guard a bit. And so the first part is you're almost speechless. The other one is just, wow, what do we do now? Because at the time, you're depending, as much as you love that job, you're also depending on the job to pay your rent or buy groceries. And so like the real world sinks into you really, really quickly. And there's a slight moment of panic for sure.
So we have this shock and awe moment. It's the, oh shit, what do we do? I think like any situation like that, you're allowed to grieve, or you're allowed to have a reaction for a short amount of time. You can be upset, you can be mad, but you quickly realize, to your point, the real world is now coming at you and you have to take an action. The entrepreneurial side of Eric creeps in, and we're quickly in conversations about what do we do next. We're vetting job offers. We have some opportunities to go into larger ad tech companies. We don't do that. What happens from there, in your words?
Well, I think there was a moment of trying to understand what that sale was, what it meant to us. You're trying to think back through your contract as kind of the fog lifts a bit, right? So you have this flashbang moment. Like you said, I think you picked the word grieve. I don't know if I went that route. I think mine probably went the anger route. But there's also, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but there's like a portion of like, you could do this yourself, right? And like some of that is certainly over exaggerated, but there is a portion where you're like, all right, from a day-to-day perspective, we've been doing this day in, well, I said day-to-day, but like day in, day out, I'm with Chris, we're on the road. We have a lot of these relationships. And I think we're kind of concerned with where it was going to leave those relationships more than anything. As much as it was, we could do this on our own, I think it was more or less, we've created these relationships. We've been driving in rental cars, staying in kind of crappy hotels together, making sure these clients have what they need. Are they going to be high and dry? And is there anything we can do to kind of bridge that in the meantime? I don't know if it was quite as thoughtful as saying, hey, we're going to start a company here. It's more or less, can I check the boxes on kind of basic income? Can I make sure that all these folks that we've created relationships with are also not left high and dry like we just were? And we kind of took it from there.
We had, I think you're right. It was, all right, it's less about us at this point. Yeah, I can be upset. I can be mad. It's a personal moment for me to reflect on, but you've created these relationships with people as your customers for years at this point, and there's a lot of trust that goes into it. And I remember 2 or 3 of them reaching out to us saying like, hey, that's awful, but what's next? What are you going to do next? And that's really where the opportunity to partner with Damon, the 3 of us, we're sitting down, we're looking at how do we spin up a media proposal or a media deck. I think you and I did that within less than a day. We're out, we're pitching. We're not even contracted employees with Damon. We're just doing this, on our own free will, praying that we can pull something together. So we flash forward a little bit, right? We get through some of the initial turbulence. You and I are having conversations around what does this mean? At the time, the company's called Centros. We believe it could be a great transition for the 2 of us. We're figuring out a way to set up our next step in our career. I believed we were doing great at the time. I know we're out on the road, we're selling, we're having fun, we're getting deals closed. There was a very specific moment, and I think it was a Detroit Tigers opening day game that we're on a party bus downtown. We're all having a good time, we're laughing, and you and Damon, who have always been great at keeping me in the positive side of the organization and keeping momentum going, there are some financial issues that are going on. I think that was the first real hurdle that we had to face as a team, the 3 of us, and really as an organization. But what did that teach you? You as now the COO, you are so tuned into the operational efficiency of the company, the profitability of the organization across a range of different departments. Take yourself back 8 years. What do you think allowed us to kind of go through that, transform, and now be in a spot where we're at today?
Yeah, so I think you're kind of polarizing differences in terms of what we're able to do, the foundation that we have built. And so super early on, there is no economies of scale there. Again, like you said, you have the fun part, which is grinding, getting out there, making sure you're bringing deals in. I think internally we would blow a horn every time it was happening. And so you just get used to this background noise and it seems like it's going great. But you have this real world moment of making sure you're really paying attention to kind of contract terms, pipeline, when all these things balloon. And again, when we're talking about contracts, because you don't have these economies of scale, your vendors that you're using want the money maybe up front or immediately. And then we're in the advertising world where we might have won a really big deal, but the terms are, at 60 or 120. And so that was where we kind of got caught in the rat race of making sure that we were hitting those singles, also going after the bigger deals. But what seems like a basic, I think you just really get back to business fundamentals much quicker in those kind of moments. But again, you can't take your eye off the ball in terms of what your cash flow looks like. Again, pipeline. I think it's easy to kind of celebrate short term, but you always have to be looking long term. And it was super real there, being outside of a bus saying hey, this might be kind of the farewell. Maybe this was as far as we can take it. But luckily, we were able to stick to the process of getting in front of clients, got the books in order, and made sure that we didn't run into that again.
That story is a great illustration of your financial head and kind of where your financial hat goes at times. I think your P&C days and what you were trying to accomplish as a steward for your customers and any financial aspect of their businesses. You also have a very creative background that came out at times during GNARSTAR. You are deep into what we do at KORTX from a product perspective. You work closely with our account management and client services teams. As a COO, I think many would say that is an integral part of being successful in that role. Where do you go on a daily basis? I mean, that's a lot to manage. Do you feel like you get pulled into more directions than others? Do you feel is there more of a passion towards some? I mean, it's a lot to manage on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So how do you go through that, and how do you make sure that you're on top of really the priorities that you've been asked to pay attention to?
Yeah, well, and I think oftentimes it's kind of positioned as if any of these things are kind of mutually exclusive, right? In terms of whether it's vision or execution or profitability versus culture. But I think those are far more intertwined. And so I don't really look at that as if you're being pulled in one direction versus another. I think there's an aspect here where, while I don't think you can force a culture to happen, I do think you can have some kind of guardrails or kind of nudge it in a direction. And a big portion of that is just making sure everyone is swimming in the same direction. And so a portion of that is, all right, how do we make some of these things that are top of mind for me, top of mind for everyone, right? And so as a leadership team, we can make sure we're on top of the financials, on top of these metrics, but then more importantly, how do we empower other team members, let them kind of come up through the ranks, make sure that they have metrics and kind of tactical meetings so that they're also top of mind there. And so making sure we have kind of open financials to the team, so it's top of mind for them as well, allows it to not just be an exercise for me where I'm thinking strictly profitability. It's each of the team members. It's like, all right, how do we create efficiencies? And again, when we were kind of talking to some of those core values of like putting the work in, but then also refining, there's these aspects of making sure what we're doing is efficient. They ultimately become profitable. We open up overhead, and you don't get caught in some of these rat races where it's a kind of top-down mentality. Everyone across the board starts to believe in this process because they kind of see the results. And so everyone's kind of refining their roles, and everyone's playing a part in making sure we get there.
What do you feel that goal setting does for an individual employee's clarity as far as their role, their career path development? We've gone through a number of those exercises. We've done some really great things, and I think we've had some struggles at times. Where do you think that appropriate goal setting gets an employee to mentally?
Yeah, so if I'm looking at it from kind of a manager perspective first, and then we'll get there. I'll take the long way in terms of answering this. I think naturally we've all had our own experiences in this, where we were in a different seat. We had managers, we had people that had expectations, and you have some that are kind of micromanage a bit, or kind of like the helicopter boss. We have others where there was no direction, and I don't know if either side of that is good. And so I think everyone is kind of striving for the middle and having a good balance of each, of making sure that you're kind of empowering or supporting folks, but also giving them the autonomy to kind of take chances or build onto their role. And so your question was around like goal setting. And I think that becomes kind of that safety net or that comfort if I am in another seat to say, I know the direction here. I kind of have a barometer or litmus test that says I'm doing what I should be doing. And sometimes that's just like peace of mind for yourself. You're like, all right, well, if I've got a manager that's kind of in this Wild West area where there, not a ton of guidance, as long as I have that North Star, I know when we're having our conversations that we're moving the ball forward here, and that I'm doing what I need to, or I'm doing above and beyond. And so I believe there's a bit of comfort there and something that allows them to kind of continue to build on top of as well.
So we've talked about minding profitability, looking at the company culture, the importance of goal setting. As a COO, you're the glue. You are the one that is really responsible for the daily operations of the company, communicating with managers, that top-down strategy, ensuring that there are those cascading messages to all team members to get everybody going in the same direction. I want to transition a bit. Like, as a student of the digital marketing ecosystem, and I know you are deeply involved in educating yourself, trying to figure out new and innovative ways for KORTX to stay competitive. How do you strike that balance? So you have daily operations versus the future of the industry and the ecosystem. How do you process that? Where does your mind go when you see new and emerging trends? How do you decide like when to pull something into KORTX as a potential, opportunity for us to evaluate or possibly bring into our go-to-market?
Yeah, so I mean, a portion of that is just being genuinely curious. So when you were saying how you're following some of those trends, I mean, obviously you have kind of the industry publications, you have all the different podcasts and things. I think one, maybe this is on the slightly more nerdy side, is like keeping up on platform docs. Like those are a big indicator as you see different features happening. There's probably an underlying reason for this. And more importantly, looking at things outside of your vertical. I think oftentimes we can cloud ourselves into say like, oh, this is the path forward because we're seeing it every day. But you have to also keep a pulse of your customers. So that's communicating with our team members, whether it's on the account management, ops, or sales side, who seeing what their feedback is, and then finding a happy balance. I think you have to make sure, and actually you put out, if I'm not wrong, put out a blog post around kind of shiny object syndrome. And I think we're in a vertical that changes so quickly, and there are new products, and all of them are super exciting. But how do you make sure you're being true to your customers? And so again, that's that customer obsession of saying, what are the business outcomes we're solving for them? And then making sure that we're doing it in a smart way that isn't a massive pivot. I think those are conversations you can have, but you should really think through the ramifications of what that does for the company culture, what that does for the customer. Because if you make this massive pivot that hasn't been thought through, I mean, chances are you can fulfill on it, but is that a kind of A+ service level and outcome, or did you give them a C? And I don't want to be in the business of giving middle of the road service. And so again, you're just balancing all of those, and then making sure you're looking at, I think you even had conversations or an interview with Damon where you asked him around when you buy versus build, and that's kind of a similar thing. And so on my end, when you're going to talk about the glue across company, big fan of process, but I'm also a big fan of having the least amount of process is needed. And so you think about that even with our tools, whether you're going to buying or building, what makes that the most efficient and creates the fewest hurdles for our team to ultimately have our clients have the best outcomes they can.
We talked about this. You just mentioned that in our first interview with Damon, there was a conversation around build versus buy. And I look back on 2014, 15, and the trends that were being pushed at that time were heavily focused around audience management. Largely, it was a DMP focus. We came from a DMP. We had a very critical decision to make in terms of how we were going to remain competitive. At the time, we decided that we weren't going to build an ad server, we weren't going to build a DSP, we weren't going to build a DMP, but we brought a lightweight customer data platform to the marketplace. We prided on accessibility, the democratization of a very powerful tech tool. It's gone from Axon as an audience management tool. You have then been really pivotal in building out our creative suite of tools. Captivate is a rich media solution that sits in the middle of that. Most recently, we've launched Campus, which is our customer service center, with a whole lot more that's going to be coming with that we're really excited about. Think back along that product timeline. The focus that Damon talked about, build versus buy. Why did we decide in a lot of these situations to customize mainstream tools like DSPs, but then build solutions like Axon, like Campus, and Captivate? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, so you nailed it with accessibility for a handful of those, but the other side is you're kind of looking for gray areas or gaps, either internally, so for efficiencies, or externally in terms of something that allows you to create stronger outcomes or allow them to see data in a different way. And I think we use that lens across all of our products, especially when you're deciding between build versus buy. And so one that you didn't mention, but was something we brought into or put into place really early on, was internal platform Blueprint. And so again, we were kind of talking about the messy start of KORTX, and we found right away, it's like, all right, we have all these campaigns running and there's all these moving pieces. Managing all of this from an Excel sheet just isn't going to cut it. And so you do the traditional route of looking at CRMs, and at the time, and I'm not even sure now if there are any that are truly built for ad tech. And so that was one of those moments where you make a big decision because you're going to take resources and build a platform. And so that allowed us for kind of a campaign management platform that allowed us to consolidate all these different assets, have all this information at everyone's fingertips. Billing, a big portion of that. Again, that's something that's probably not as common for any other CRM. They're typically looking at kind of SaaS or renewal based things where it's all right, this is the price for 30 days. It repeats how often. They're not typically looking at, this is what flat rate looks like. This is a CPM. This is project based. And so that was kind of a critical decision for us that allowed us to remain lean, but super, super powerful in terms of what we were able to execute on and continue to iterate on that to even be able to automatically deploy these campaigns or build them in the corresponding platforms. And so I think that kind of became the evolution of how we looked at platforms. Like you said, we weren't going to build a DSP, but we certainly wanted to find one that we were able to extend on. And so again, we didn't want to have cookie cutter tools and we didn't want to have cookie cutter results. We had to find partners that allowed us to build on their tech and transform how we were deploying campaigns so that we could get the outcomes we wanted for our clients. And we kind of continued down that road, did the same thing with creative. I was like, all right, how do we make sure we have kind of engaging ads or have the right message in front of folks? And we brought kind of that rich media suite in place. And then you mentioned Axon. Those two kind of happen at the same time in terms of kind of advanced segmentation. If I'm able to segment all these users, how do I make sure I'm getting that message? And that's kind of that glue between Axon and the rich media suite there. But again, it was filling these gaps. And so in terms of Axon, again, that was accessibility. We saw in the big CDPs or DMPs, there is a huge barrier to entry in terms of cost or even expertise internally. And you were buying a lot of tools. You might have one need for this, but I had to get into this kind of super bloated suite. And I had no option. I had to be all in on one platform. And as we kind of mentioned there, when we have a mentality of build and buy, we're looking at kind of agnostic type platforms. We wanted to make sure, that we could work between different platforms, but still have the ability to really get what we needed out of it. And that's where we saw bringing that type of platform to our customer base. It's like, all right, you really need to be able to understand your audience. You might not need all of these other tools. What if we provide just that and allow them to get up and running and be competitive in their markets?
That's super insightful. I think I might coin a term there. You said, when we're in the gray space or the gray space decisions, that's when the decision to build a solution has come out. I think that's it. Is like we oftentimes help people out of the gray space, whether it's us, whether it's our customers. There's a lot of those unknowns in terms of like how to face a problem that our agency partners have, that our brand marketers have, or our internal team members. And that's really like when those decisions are made, which in my opinion is something that I don't know if a lot of traditional ad tech or software companies always think that way. It's more of a product feature, product update. It's very intentional. And I think we're learning to adopt more of that mentality to be more predictable in terms of what we're releasing when we're releasing it. But there's still a level of spontaneity, I think, that a company of our size can have to be reactive to the right situations.
And we also have the upside where, every pitch you're listening to talks about this great tech and all these bells and whistles. It's great being at a place where we're developing that. It's not just a thing of it's kind of a pass-through pitch of the vendors I have. And so that certainly gives us an advantage. And that's where we started to aggregate all these tools that we've built that kind of fill that gap or that gray space, and then bring them or clean them up a bit and bring them client facing. And so you mentioned campus, and again, with the way the market shifts, everything's always being kind of disrupted. And we see this in other verticals as well. especially in things that are kind of like start to lean into the commodity space. And so I always think of kind of the finance world and what we saw with mortgages and what you kind of saw with Rocket Mortgage, where, all right, largely kind of commodity based thing, but they were able to change like either the barrier to entry or the customer experience there. And so again, it's kind of that obsession there. And I think we're taking a similar approach with campus by bundling what were siloed tools or disparate tools, but bringing all the things that our customers need into one platform, allowing them to have it easy to use. So much like we saw exponential growth when we had Blueprint, how do we create that blueprint for our customers? And that's what we're attempting to do through campus, to give them a centralized spot to house all their campaign information, to have all their reporting, and over time bring in even competitive reporting. So at a glance, I can see what my audiences are doing, but what my campaigns are doing, and have a comfort level in terms of what my next best actions are. And so we're really excited as we're bringing that to market.
I'm going to be on the other side of this one. I think those are the business essentials, getting that product to the table, getting it to the marketplace, and being able to say, like, this is a workflow solution. This is an automated reporting platform. Those are all really exciting. The one thing that a lot of folks are getting really concerned about right now, and I think it's fair over the last few years, we talk about issues with the identity ecosystem, some changes that'll be going on there, the ability of one-to-one targeting, the power of creative, the power of understanding nuances about your aggregate audience, to then have the ability to take more of a channel-based approach and measure the impact of that channel-based approach, and have the ability to make tweaks nearly in real time based on performance forecasts. That's where I get really excited. And I know that's a whole other conversation that we could have about the future of campus, is that how do you get out of this element of the way we operate today, which is still so one-to-one in the programmatic space? And the reality of that, it's not going to be an option for all that much longer, unless there are user opt-in opportunities. Then sure, that's still very much at play. But for the remainder of marketing and how we talk to others, you and I have had this conversation many times. It's forcing us to go back to the basics of marketing and thinking of the 4 Ps and thinking of what does an integrated marketing strategy look like. And it's that digital traditional mix now that us as an organization, I think we've been hungry for this type of opportunity, because it allows us to really like flex our skills, which leads me into my next question. We have 50 employees at KORTX. We've heard a lot of great things from our customers about the staff and the quality and the experience. Just, Eric, what are some of your observations of some of the folks that we're lucky enough to work with on a daily basis? Can you just speak to the quality of talent that we have here?
Yeah, that's the main takeaway that I have is looking for people that are genuinely curious, that also have that kind of customer obsession. And that's why I was always saying, like, earlier, when you don't have kind of profitability and culture being these mutually exclusive things, you have people that are coming in, and I mean, early on we always called it kind of Detroit grit, but when you're interviewing folks, you're really excited to come on, because you're like, all right, they can give me a run for my money. They're going to go deep here. I know I'm going to be learning something every day, and they're really pushing the boundaries of what we're able to do. So, hey, we kind of think of advertising this way, but they're bringing new thoughts, they're bringing new process or new ways of doing that. And luckily we're surrounded by a vast majority of folks that have that passion, but are also kind of having a disruptive mindset while being customer focused. And so we're super blessed on that side.
I echo that 100% with you. The last question I have for you. We look at our vision, and we were fortunate enough to craft that with our employees, which is, I think, something that is so unique that they were comfortable enough to share their thoughts with us and their real aspirations, what they want to be able to do professionally, personally, in the community. We are really focused on empowering transformative growth for our employees, for our customers, for our stakeholders. What is your perspective on that vision, and how do you see KORTX fulfilling it?
Yeah, and so transformative growth looks different for everybody, but I do think we're all in a similar market. We all have, expectations of what we're trying to get out of, whether it's advertising or just business goals in general. And so when we're in a market that we just talked about is ever shifting and is something that, can make folks uncomfortable, I look at that as being a foundational piece for folks. So if I'm in a market of quicksand, I want to be that platform that gives them a strong footing and confidence to say, I've got a strong partner, a knowledgeable partner, one that's nimble enough to kind of navigate all of the ever-changing aspects of the marketplace, but then is really along for the ride to make sure that I'm getting business outcomes. And so, like I mentioned earlier, that growth can be significantly different based on who we're working with, but I want to make sure I'm covering the basis on all the whole other side there of generating the outcomes, but more importantly, being kind of customer obsessed so that they have the best experience and comfort in navigating.
Eric, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have this conversation. And for everybody that tuned in, we appreciate you jumping into another enlightening conversation in our Empowering Transformative Growth series. We hope you've gained valuable insights and a deeper understanding of what makes KORTX a unique and vibrant place to work and grow. If you enjoyed this episode, check out the rest of our series to hear more inspiring stories from our team. Until next time, take care, continue empowering transformative growth in everything you do. Goodbye.